Welcome to Catholic Life, as we spotlight ordinary people with extraordinary faith. I'm Dina Dow. I'm so happy you're with us this half hour as we talk with one of my dear friends, whom I just love, Jennifer Prather. She is one of our local theologians, and I call theology of the body expert our go-to for sure, but a whole lot more than that. You're also the founder and the director and the instructor of Imaging Gift Ministries. We'll talk a little bit about her ministry and what that serves. So thanks for being with us, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so good to see you. We email a lot and talk a lot through text and sometimes Zoom, so it's great to have you here.
In person.
Yeah, and really invite our viewers into this whole beautiful teaching of image and likeness, theology of the body. And so happy that you're here, that you can kind of support us on that and help us on our journey. But before that, tell us a little about yourself and how you came to be where you are today, right?
Sure. Well, I'm native to the Diocese of Lake Charles. That's where I was born and raised. And when I went to college, I transferred out to UL in Lafayette, and I lived most of my young adult life there. I was there for 15 years or so. That's where I met my husband, and I actually moved to Baton Rouge. I was working in a church parish at the time, but I really wanted to get back into the classroom. And so my husband actually got a job. His company said, we're going to transfer you to Baton Rouge. And it was about 3 months before we got married. So I said, well, I might as well look for a job in Baton Rouge if that's where you're going to end up. And that's how I ended up here in Baton Rouge. And it was so funny because his company actually did not transfer.
Oh, no. Oh, my gosh.
So he had to find a new job
in Baton Rouge.
once I got a job here. Yeah. So I'm now, I've been teaching at St. Joseph's Academy for this coming year will be my 12th year there, but it'll be my 22nd year in Catholic education.
Oh, great.
So I didn't graduate in education, but whenever I was actually working in the juvenile justice system. That's what I was doing before. And I was in my early 20s, and I was having some problems with my health, and they couldn't really pinpoint what exactly was going on. And one day my doctor said, what do you do for a living?
I said,
I'm in
stress.
the stress. And my doctor literally said, you need a new job. So I said, okay, well, what do I love more than anything else? And of course, for me at that time and now, is the church. And so I thought, I love to learn. Let's see if anybody needs a teacher. And I cold called some schools in the Diocese of Lafayette, got an interview and started teaching.
Oh, that's great.
So my first year, they always say teaching in the first year is the hardest. And it was hard, but I felt like I was born to be teaching.
That's a charism.
You're right,
charism.
Exactly. So whenever I got my master's in theological studies a little bit later in life. I graduated, I was a COVID graduate from Notre Dame Seminary in New Orleans. So my graduation didn't look quite the way I thought it would. But anyway, so I earned my master's in theological studies from there. Graduated with a few local priests, and it's very exciting.
Oh, that's so
to learn
good.
alongside them, and then
now to actually serve in the same diocese with them.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
So obviously you were drawn to Christian anthropology.
Yes, yes, I was.
And mainly theology of the body. But before we kind of dive into St. John Paul II and how he led us down that journey, let's talk about the foundations of Christian anthropology. I mean, that's a huge word, right?
Yeah.
But in our studies, in graduate school in theology, that was always one that I was drawn to also too, because it was beautiful. So kind of give us some foundations on anthropology first, and then we'll move into theology of the body and how they kind of connect.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I had never heard of Christian anthropology before I was in grad school. And a teacher, one of my professors, assigned Centus Annus that we to read it and analyze it. And that's where I first discovered this concept of Christian anthropology. So anthropology, the study of the human person, and to put the Christian in front of it, right, is to study the human person but include God in that study.
Yeah.
The creator of the human person. And then to look to his son, our Lord Christ, to know what it means to be a human person, the fullness of humanity. And so that's the meaning of the term anyway. But I remember reading Centus Annus, and it was just like little explosions going off as I was going through the document.
Yeah.
And for me, the biggest takeaway that I saw, John Paul was talking about the church and respect for, the dignity of the person, because it's all about social justice,
right?
That encyclical. And I remember reading this and realizing that Jesus founded a sacramental church because we're human.
Yeah.
Because we ourselves are incarnations.
Yeah.
Little I incarnations.
Yeah.
And so we are sacramental. Mm-hmm. Our bodies, right, reveal who we are as a person. And so it just totally blew me away that, I had always been Catholic, always loved and appreciated my faith, but I didn't realize it is tailor-made for the human person. That's why he gave us sacraments, visible signs of invisible realities, things that are actually happening, not just cute, rituals, but they're actually occurring.
Deep meaning, and purpose and intention behind that
exactly,
too.
Yeah, and so it just changed my whole way of relating to the faith. And I remember thinking, why don't all Catholics know this?
Yeah.
Like, why don't all Catholics realize the profundity of this, right? Why, And then the very next semester, I had a class, and the text that we had to read was John Paul's speeches from Theology of the Body.
Yeah.
And once I started to break into that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is his anthropology.
Right. This is it.
This is it.
Yeah.
And it speaks to not only the person, who the person is and how God created the human person, but then if you take the principles and you apply them, they apply to any kind of, it applies to all aspects of our faith.
Everything. It's foundational.
It's foundational.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called a presupposition, right? So it is presupposed that in learning our faith, we already know this.
Yeah.
And what I realized was, no, we don't.
Yeah, we don't know this yet.
I didn't know it. So I made it, or I wanted, I felt this real draw, this real pull that I have to, I can't keep it secret.
Right.
I know this now, and I can't sit on it and not give it to others. And my first approach was to my principal, and I give her so much credit. I wrote a curriculum for high school.
Yeah.
And my principal let me, and I'm so overjoyed about that. And but to focus on the anthropology of it.
Yeah.
Because I think what was popularized at first was geared toward youth, which is good. It's a good application. But put forth more as a chastity program, which is not bad. It's not a bad application, but it's also short-sighted.
Yeah.
Because it's not the fullness.
There's more to it than that.
There's a lot more to it than that. Yeah.
Because a lot of people hear theology of the body and think, oh, that's just
just an abstinence program that we teach to children.
Yeah.
That's what people associate it with.
Yeah.
And then you say, I'm not a child and I'm married, so I don't need to learn about
that.
or I don't need to learn, So
wow.
So it's much deeper, much more rich, and that's the curriculum that my principal allowed me to put together. And I still teach that curriculum for seniors. Yeah.
And they're driven to that though too. They're drawn to be a part of that because there's a lot of questions that we have about the human person made in the image and likeness of God. That once you start kind of unraveling all of that, what we think we know,
right,
and then listening to what the Lord is pouring into, through sacred scripture, which is right in front of us.
Right.
We just need someone to walk. It's like the eunuch, right? And Philip.
Right.
I know what I'm reading, but I don't understand it.
Right. Exactly.
And so, in the light of theology of the body and Christian anthropology, when you start reading, passages like Genesis, and then Jesus' passages in Matthew about the woman caught in adultery and all the marriages and all this stuff, you start going, whoa, wait a minute, this is different. So this is a really unfair question.
Okay.
But if you had to take away something huge, right, one thing from theology of the body, and what would that be for someone to invite them into learning? Like, why would they want to learn more about that?
Well, I think I would try to speak to some more contemporary issues that it applies to.
Yeah.
And the main thing, I think the overall, is about identity, human identity. And so I would say, if you want to understand yourself, or you want to understand, get some insight into what people are struggling with today, their identity, then this is the teaching that's going to show us. So I would say that's the biggest takeaway.
I think the personal understanding of personal identity, right, made in the image and likeness, and what does that mean? You know, like people say it all the time, what does that mean? But also to the opportunity that once I have some sort of understanding, to continue to grow in that understanding, but also it's shedding light on all the other issues that are happening within the culture and society when it comes to identity too.
Exactly.
It just makes sense. Yeah.
Right. I'm glad that you said that. It makes sense. My experience usually in teaching theology of the body is it's beautiful to see light bulbs going off and people changing right in front of your eyes. And I find that it's an echo, like within ourselves, we have this echo of that truth. And then when you read it in the text, it's a deepening of that, but it's like at the same time, it's a recognition of something that exists in you. And at the same time is a deepening of that because of how deep John Paul goes with
dives with it too. And he didn't even start this overnight. I mean, it began, with his writings, back in the 50s and 60s, and his original book, I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was like, these were things that he was inspired to learn about. And I just watched a really long movie, 3.5-hour movie about St. John Paul II, like the man who became Pope, I think it was called. And it was interesting that he was always writing, but he was always observing. He was always in relationship with people, with their different circumstances and situations, but approaching them through the lens of Christ, right through the lens of that you are made in God's image and likeness, and what does that mean from that perspective, and how am I called to respond and to love and to treat you through that. Okay, we are at a halfway point. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to focus a little bit more on theology of the body and then move into image and gift ministries and the courses that you have, the opportunities you have to offer that we can kind of grow more and deeper in this too. So with us, we'll be right back in just a minute.
Buying local products should be about freshness, and that's what we do here at River Road Coffees. We get our coffee on the shelf within about a week, and maximum, it comes off the shelf in 3 months. We don't even think our competitors get it on the shelf in 3 months.
Welcome back to Catholic Life as we spotlight ordinary people with extraordinary faith. And we are talking with Jennifer Prather, one of my favorite human persons on the planet, founder and instructor of Image and Gift Ministries. I want to make sure I get that right. And gosh, so we were just talking about foundations of Christian anthropology, a little bit about the teachings of John Paul II. And this is actually the book, Man and Woman, He Created Them, A Theology of the Body. So this is his audiences that John Paul II did for 3 years, I think it was. How long ago?
It was about 3 years that he delivered it.
But years before that, creating it and writing it too. So kind of the foundations of it. So what is Image and Gift Ministries all about? Like, what is the opportunity for us to participate in your ministries?
Yeah, so Image and Gift Ministries formed as a result, after I wrote the curriculum for the high schoolers, I had parents say, I want to learn.
I want to take this class.
What their daughters were saying, And so I reworked that curriculum into a 5-session so I could teach it to the parents. And then we had our coffee meeting where I just brought a flyer hoping that, I would get more adults if they wanted to learn. And that is really what sparked it becoming something much more than I ever imagined,
and
that
just
it would
a little background on that. I just been appointed Director of Evangelization and Catechesis, and there was a kind of a gap in ministry when it comes to the teachings of theology of the body on a diocesan level. And so I was reaching out to our cohorts in New Orleans, and then a friend of ours connected us with Jennifer. So she did. We met with coffee, and she comes with this flyer, and I'm like, oh, great. When can I take the class? Because I don't ever want to offer what I haven't taken anyway.
Of course.
And
you were in that very first class.
I was in the class, too.
Yeah.
It was good. I took my notes and my book and everything. Although I'd had it in graduate school, you can never learn enough.
No.
And you can always learn new things from different instructors. About the same content, but from even a broader perspective or even a more detailed perspective, depending on experience. And then I'm a different person because that was 7-8 years before that. So just continuing to grow. That's that adult faith formation that we have to continue to do. But I think for sure this, for me, for theology of the body and image and gift and the foundations of it, really help shine the light on everything else that we're called to do as Catholic Christians. So in our, evangelization and discipleship. So to educate, encounter, and embody are kind of your 3
Those
E's.
Those are my three E's. Yeah, so that's a good way to put it. So theology of the body is rooted in we cannot know ourselves as a human person. We cannot know our identity unless we encounter Christ. We have to have a deep encounter with him because only he can show us who we are. And one example that I really love to give about this that I think is really people can relate to, if you've ever prayed, you'll be able to relate to this. One of my favorite ways to pray is in adoration. And sometimes I'll be maybe doing a meditation on scripture, or I'll just be thinking about something that I'm maybe struggling with. And then all of a sudden it's very gentle because it's from the Holy Spirit. But it's like a little mirror rises up, and you see yourself, as you really are. And sometimes that can be positive, and sometimes you need to improve.
Sometimes it can sting a little bit.
Right, exactly. You're like, oh, that doesn't look like Jesus. But this in the context of relationship is where that kind of gentle confrontation happens, where I can learn about myself and how I'm either doing well in growing in Jesus' likeness or where I'm lacking. And so without the encounter with Christ, I can learn all the book knowledge that I want to. I could, open out this huge book and have a sharp intellect and be able to understand it all. But until I'm in the context of a relationship, that's when I start to change. And theology of the body is the kind of material that whenever you approach it through the relationship with Christ, you're gonna be able to see it then lived. You're gonna embody it.
Yeah, I found it always to be a prayerful study.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because you can get caught up in the words and trying to remember and comprehend everything, but sitting with it, I think it takes a little bit more time to marinate. And to really kind of acclimate to what am I hearing here, and what is the Lord trying to teach me in this?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's nothing that you can actually rush through. You can get a lot of formation.
You can.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get a lot of, exactly.
Check the boxes
You
off.
can check the boxes off.
But it's good to have the conversation, which is what I like about Image and Gift, is that as we're being taught, there's also to the conversation that's happening in the dialogue of kind of breaking it open and understanding. Because it is complex, it is deep, but that's because we are complex and, and deep spiritual, embodied, persons.
And John Paul, as an author, we have to remember we're dealing with, a man who was a deep philosophical thinker.
Yes.
And so the text can be intimidating, but that's one thing with Image and Gift that I really am married to, is that I want to use his words.
Yeah.
I don't want to use a filter of his words.
Right.
And so that's one thing that I think differentiates the way I approach it from maybe the way others approach it. I want the person who's studying it with me to read some of that text. And hear it, because and I find that lay people are very capable. Even lay people without a theology degree. And if they just have someone to say, oh, this is a really big word, but it means this, you know? And if you I have found that if I just accompany them through the reading, then they get the benefit of the depth of the author. It's
true.
much more profound to hear John Paul say it than to hear Jennifer say it.
Try to say what he said.
Right, exactly.
That's why I quote him and I don't paraphrase him. Right.
Exactly, yeah.
So the mission of Image and Gift is to educate Catholic Christians, especially parish and Catholic school leaders, in an authentic Christian anthropology and empower them to embody this anthropology. So we ourselves, right? And then through encounter with one another and with Christ, which actually that's something that I've personally experienced, for sure. I can see that. And the vision is to seek and to assist Catholic Christians to grow in holiness, so that by living redeemed, they can transform their culture to one of charity and truth. Right? So transforming the culture to one of charity and truth, right? So love and truth and culture, all, because that's our calling, right?
Exactly, as Christians.
We're made to evangelize, and in that evangelization comes that love and truth that comes forth from within.
And like Edith Stein says, and the love and the truth have to always go together because they're both rooted in the person of Christ. Right. So if you have one without the other, you know, you can have all love, but if we don't encourage and accompany people to the fullness of truth, then we stand for anything. And then the opposite, though, if I just pound people with the truth, with no kind of compassion or empathy, then who wants to listen to that?
I know, it's just a lecture.
You're right, it's just a lecture. And no one wants to be talked at.
Correct.
You know, so
they want to be talked dialogue.
Right, exactly.
So what does one expect if I'm looking through the courses? You have a certificate program, you've got other opportunities of in-person and conversations. What do I expect if I'm thinking, oh, this is interesting? What do we have to offer through Image and Gift?
Right, sure. So I have courses. So I know that it might be difficult. What I find is that it's easy to do like, oh, come give an hour talk or come give a 2-hour talk. My strengths, though, are in giving more lengthy teaching. I think that this topic lends itself to really taking a deep dive, and we might shortchange it if we just have an hour, 2 hours. So my format's really different, but I think it's worth it. And because it touches so deeply in the heart of who we are as persons. And if I can take that in and let it transform me, if I can embody it, then everyone I touch will be affected. So that's different about Image and Gift. I'll offer a number of courses, not just talks, right? One is the main course of Theology of the Body, where I just take the participants through the John Paul II's triptych, which is the first part of that book. And so we look at our past in original man, what humans were created to be by God in the original plan, and then where we are now as fallen but redeemed, and then where we are headed for our future in the resurrection of the body. And so that can be done in a parish or a school, like these trainings that are coming up for me. I'm going to be training catechists in the Diocese of Lake Charles in the fall and the spring. So they have asked for a 10-hour taking through that. So I can do that. That's a good time period. And they do it in 2 Saturdays, which is great.
Yeah.
And then I also offer, though, a shorter, if you just want your catechist to be introduced. I understand that like several of the textbooks being given for PSR, depending on what publisher you use, they're using theology of the body terms, like actual terms from the catechesis.
Yeah.
And I know one call that I got from a diocese was, nobody knows what these terms mean.
Yeah.
The terms there and the definitions there, but they don't really understand the concept.
Yeah.
And so I do a shorter 3-hour, like, let's just look. Let me just tell you about these concepts.
Yeah. Okay.
And then hopefully the catechists walk away with at least being able to know how to plan their sessions for the. I also offer, and those are both in-person trainings, but then I have an online training. And that's coming up too in the spring, in January, for the Diocese of Baton Rouge. So I think it's all catechists and all Catholic school employers if they teach about sexuality.
And parish catechists.
So they take the course with me, and it's a longer course. It's 5 weeks, 2-hour sessions. But there's no homework unless you miss.
And do a makeup class.
Right. If you miss, you have to do a makeup. But other than that, I didn't want to give outside work because it's so intense in the live interaction.
But it gives such a good foundation for people to continue. And like you said, I think the extended classes gives more time because you really have to go back, after you take one of the courses, you really have to go back. Even someone who studied it before, I was like, I really need to revisit this again.
Right.
Yeah.
I think what's happening whenever people first learn it, I think what happens is I have this student online. I'll just share this because it's what I feel all the time for the certificate program, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And every time we come to like one of those firework moments, and one of my students is like,
that's what she did with
my
her
mind
hands.
is blown. So that happens.
Or they say, how come I wasn't taught this a long time ago?
Right. So the intensity of it, I think it's good to have time to let it permeate, let it settle.
Our half hour is over though, so but I'm going to point people to your website. So it's imageandgift.com, imageandgift.com, and you can tell Jennifer's extremely personable. So if you just leave a note on her website and she'll get back with you immediately, or you can call the Office of Evangelization and Catechesis here at the Diocese of Baton Rouge and we can connect you guys too. Thank you so much for being here. It was such a fast interview, but so much more to learn and grow into. So you do have a talk coming up on October 26th at Our Lady of Mercy.
Our Lady of Mercy on gender identity.
And which is very important right now.
Yes.
All right, so go to her website, and if any more questions, just call the Office of Evangelization.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jennifer, for being with us. Thank you for being with us on Catholic Life. Until next time, God bless you and grant you His peace.